Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe, Mary Kay Cabot, Ashley Bastock with you, recording this on Friday. It's almost 2 o'clock here. And of course, we are recording this shortly after Jim Schwartz. It came out that he resigned as defensive coordinator of the Cleveland Browns. It ends a fairly long saga here, Mary Kay, with Todd Monken coming in, getting that job over Jim, Jim not being very happy about it. And then Todd Monken kind of sending a message the other day that, basically saying, I don't really need Jim Schwartz. So not a huge surprise here necessarily on Friday that this ended. It felt like when we left that building on Tuesday, that might be where this ends up. But Jim Schwartz resigns. The language there is very important because it means, of course, the Browns still retain his rights. There's still some complications. If at some point he wants to take another job, whether something materializes here soon, he takes a year off and something materializes next year, whatever it might be. So the Jim Schwartz, I guess, saga isn't entirely over. But as far as Jim being the Browns defensive coordinator, that is over.
It really is. And of course, the writing was 100% on the wall when Todd Monken got up there on Tuesday at his introductory press conference and said what he said about Jim Schwartz. And it was funny because he even said, I wasn't going to say this, but I'm going to say it. And then he went on to say, I didn't take this job for Jim Schwartz. I wasn't trying to chip Jim Schwartz. I was trying to chip Myles Garrett. We're all sitting there going, whoa, whoa. So we knew at that point that this did not go well when those two had their conversation. I was told that Jim came into the building and talked to them on Monday. And obviously it didn't go well. So I think by the time he stood up there, he knew full well that Jim wasn't coming back. And I think that maybe there was a 1% chance or a 2% chance that something could be salvaged from this if they gave it just a little bit more breathing room or threw a little bit more money at it. But alas, that wasn't happening. So he was just not going to be coming back here. And now the Browns are going to be starting a defensive coordinator search. And once again, as you mentioned, Dan, Jim is under contract for 2 more seasons. He's got his regular salary next year, and then the Browns have an option for 2027. So basically, for all intents and purposes, it's a 2-year contract that they have his rights for 2 more years. He cannot go coach somewhere else right now. And I don't think they're motivated at all to let him out of that contract and go coach somewhere else. Now, they've done it in the past for other people for other reasons, right? They let Kyle Shanahan out of his contract back in the day because there were so many things going on. And he had a really good, strong case for why this was untenable for him. And then the next person they let out of their contract was Bill Callahan, and that was to go work with his son. They were not going to keep him from doing that. But Jim Schwartz, they wanted him here. He has presided over one of the best defenses in the NFL for the last 3 years. Just yesterday, Myles Garrett accepted his 2nd NFL Defensive Player of the Year award. Carson Schwesinger accepted Rookie Defensive Player of the Year award. And they wanted Jim here, and they felt that he could work with Todd Monken. So this is not something where they're parting amicably right now. I'm sure cooler heads might prevail down the road, but right now, this is a little bit of an ugly ending for Jim here.
Yeah, and it just felt like, personally, I think this is probably what's best for Todd Monken moving forward, to be able to kind of put his stamp on this team, to be able to hire his own guy, have his own guy in place. But it just feels like both sides sort of messed this up. The Browns initially, by kind of thinking like, hey, it'll be all right if we don't give Jim this job, but he'll still want to work here. And then Jim, by not really handling things very well when he didn't get the head coaching job. So now you've got this situation where the Browns don't want to help him out. He obviously didn't want to help them out at all. There's an alternate universe, I think, Ashley, where maybe Jim sits down with Todd Monken. Maybe they just don't think it's going to work. And Todd goes to the Browns and say, you know what, we need to go in a different direction. And now Jim is free to go look for another job without having to worry about the Browns controlling his rights. But I just think in the end, initially, I don't know that the Browns were doing the right thing, but now I think Jim just didn't handle his exit very well, and he's kind of stuck here because of that contract.
Yeah, and like we've talked about, I mean, a lot of the dust around the league has like largely settled. I mean, I know there's already been some speculating on Twitter with the Raiders tried to make a move for him possibly, like, but there's not a ton of options. And I agree. Look, I think from what we can glean, what we know about this reaction, I just think it was bungled by everyone. Like that seems like the most likely option to me. And Mary Kay, a couple, maybe last week it was, like laid out how she would have like pitched this opportunity to Jim Schwartz or what the Browns, should have been doing. And I question if they did do any of those things. Like it's very obvious this is a team that needs offensive help. If that wasn't made clear to him from the start, that they were most likely to go with an offensive minded head coach, like I think that's an issue with the Browns. And I do think somebody like Jim Schwartz, who did so much for this team over the last 3 years, like is obviously deserving of that. Anyone would be, but I think it just helps to be upfront as you're going through that process about what your reality is as a team. And then, I mean, they've been saying since the day they hired Todd Monken and these reports came out about Jim Schwartz that like you can never say never in the NFL. But based on that reaction, it just seemed like unlikely that this was going to be salvaged because it was such a strong reaction. It got leaked basically immediately, like within an hour of the news breaking that the job was Todd Monken's. And it just seemed like it was going to be really hard to salvage, but I think everyone kind of kept that opportunity open. But by the time we talked to Todd Monken on Tuesday, as Mary Kay said, like it just seemed like the ship had all but left the dock at that point.
Yeah, and again, I just think, Mary Kay, like Jim, to me at least, I think Jim has the right to say, "Hey, you know what? You guys got me all the way to the finish line here in these head coach interviews, and you didn't hire me, and I just don't really feel comfortable working here, anymore." Like, I think that would be fair for him to say that, but again, it just the way he handled it almost made the Browns dig in their heels even more, I think, and basically, you talk about the Kyle Shanahan situation, the Bill Callahan situation. They were able to make those situations work and let those guys go for different reasons. At some point, you would hope everybody could sit down and just be adults and figure this out. But when it just sort of explodes, like it seems to have exploded, I just think Jim hurt himself by acting the way he acted. Like I think there could have been a scenario where these guys could have said, you know what? Yeah, we want to keep you around, but if it's really just not going to work, if this isn't going to work for you, then okay, we'll work something out.
Yeah, I think so too. As I mentioned, and Ashley brought up again last week, I was talking about the fact that if the messaging from the jump had been a little bit different, maybe he would have been prepared for this. Maybe they could have said, we really want to fix our offense. We really want to go in that direction. We really want you to stay and we want to hear what you have to say, but we're leaning heavily towards offense. And we just want you to know going into it that that's our lean. And if they had done that, then maybe he wouldn't have gotten his hopes up so much. But he had his hopes up. He thought he was getting this job, and he had a good chance of getting this job. He came down to one of three finalists, and that was Jim, Todd, and Rams pass game coordinator Nate Scheelhaus. And as I've mentioned several times before on this pod, on Tuesday, the day before Todd was announced as a head coach, they gave each of those guys sort of one more opportunity, one more little check in to try to clarify a few things. And it did come down to that day. It was, it was pretty close. Now we have heard that Todd was in the lead the whole entire time, but I think what pushed Todd over the top, in addition to his ability to transform and change an offense, was the fact that he was going to be able to bring over this whole entire offensive staff from the Baltimore Ravens, whereas Jim would have been starting from scratch on offense, and they would have had to have put together a new scheme and new coaches along with all the new personnel. So I think Todd's vision for the offense was very clear and sound and mapped out, and it was going to get underway right away. And they were sure that he was going to be able to pull that off. But I do think that had they just presented it a little bit differently to Jim, maybe there was a path forward. Maybe there would have been. But under the current circumstances, I mean, I had been hearing things about, I mean, he was dressed for success in that building in the day or two when he was inside the building. He on Tuesday in particular, I think he really felt that he was getting the job. And I know it was a huge blow to, his life, his career, his ego not to get it. But I also think that there could have been a world in which if he would have been able to come back here and give it his all this year and just kind of somehow swallow that pride a little bit, that I think Todd and Jim could have worked very well together, maybe won some games in 2026, and then you find yourself back out in the head coaching cycle again, and maybe somebody takes a chance on you because by that point, Todd Monken is looking pretty good. John Harbaugh's looking pretty good. Mike McCarthy's looking pretty good. I mean, potentially, right? So I tweeted yesterday that, 60 is the new 40 in these head coaching cycles. And maybe, just maybe, someone would have given Jim a look. The other thing is you're walking away from some of the best players that you've ever coached in your entire NFL career. And it's a tight-knit group and it's a family. And I think that's a lot to turn your back on and walk away from, as well as $10 million where you could have set your family and your children up even a little bit better than you already have.
Yeah, I mean, he was in a position where he could have probably leveraged him a little bit if he wanted to. Like, hey, yeah, okay, I will come back, but yeah, but it sort of all went out the window with that initial reaction and then those leaks and all of that. It just sort of torpedoed that. Now, again, I do think, my concern ultimately was a situation where, let's say you're sitting there 7 games into the season and you're 2-5, and maybe you've lost a couple of tough games and the offense hasn't quite been what it was expected because you got a bunch of young guys and you don't know who your quarterback's going to be and all this stuff. Like, how does that play when we're talking to Myles Garrett on Fridays and when Jim is sitting up there on Thursdays if his defense is playing great and they're losing games? I think there was risk in bringing Jim Schwartz back, and I do think, and we don't know what all the fallout of this is going to be just yet, right? We haven't heard Myles Garrett's thoughts really on the whole Jim Schwartz situation, and certainly haven't heard his thoughts since, as of this recording, at least since Jim actually resigned. So I don't know, Ashley, what all the fallout is going to be, but I do think there's a chance where, maybe you're not necessarily better today on February 6th, but just long term, this just might be the best outcome for the Browns overall, and maybe the best outcome for Todd Monken, again, as he kind of tries to put his stamp on this team.
Maybe. I think the flip side, though, is if, they let Jim go, Jim resigns, however, obviously that's what happened, but by choosing to not, go with Jim for head coach or, making the situation right ahead of time and Jim leaving, now I wonder if the defense ends up, for whatever reason, and like I don't think this is going to happen because we know Todd Monken says he wants to keep that system in place, which I have always said is the most important part of this defense and Jim Schwartz. It is more so about the system itself and finding someone who plays this style of system as opposed to like more of a Vic Fangio system. But if the defense would take a step back, I do worry that you're still going to have some of those disgruntled feelings because then they're going to be like, well, why did we mess with a good thing when, again, I've said it on our videos on our podcast. I think like this idea, the buzzword in Berea lately seems to be accountability among the players. I think there's very much a perception among the defensive players, particularly Denzel Ward and Myles Garrett, who are guys that bring it up constantly, that the offensive side of the ball was not like held accountable for much the last 2 years while they've been given no help. So you do wonder if those feelings would arise for different reasons now. But I mean, again, we're going to have to wait and see. I wondered on Thursday night when Myles Garrett got up there and accepted his Defensive Player of the Year award, if he was going to say anything directly about Jim Schwartz. And I think he ended up just thanking his coaches generically. He didn't, but I mean, obviously, the time to ask him that is going to be in the coming months here for sure.
Well, yeah, and that to that point, that was something that Jerome Baker was at the Cleveland Sports Awards last night. One of the things he said about Jim Schwartz is he holds everybody accountable. So, like to that point, we heard that from defenders over and over again. That was something that Jim did well. But that said, look, Jim is gone. It's time to move on. It is Mary Kay. We just finished up the coaching search, and now we're on the defensive coordinator search. So just never ending here with the Cleveland Browns. Uh, where does this go? I mean, we know we've talked about that. We were sitting in that room on Tuesday, and a bunch of defensive guys were in there. Jacques Césaire was in there, Jason Tarver, Ephraim Banda. So there are some internal candidates potentially. Tarver's been a DC at the NFL level. Banda has been a DC at the college level and has had interviews for NFL defensive coordinator jobs. So there are internal candidates. But where do you think Todd, when you talk about a 60-year-old coach who's been around forever and has a million connections, it's not always just as simple as just hire the guys that are in the building. Maybe he's got somebody that he's always thought, man, that guy would make a great defensive coordinator. I want to work with that guy. Where do you think this is going to go post Jim Schwartz?
Well, we've already seen a few names floated out of there. One of them is Corey Unland, who was here under Romeo Crennel in the in the early 2000s, and he spent 4 years here, so he's very familiar with being here. And he was a close associate of Todd Monken's when they were together with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And so I would have a tendency to think that he's going to want somebody like that to coordinate his defense. This is his opportunity to have coordinators in place that he really knows, trusts, feels comfortable with, understands how they work, and knows that what he's going to get in the heat of the moment when the chips are down. He knows their personalities, knows their leadership styles, knows that they would be loyal to him, right? I think there's something to be said for that. So it's an opportunity for him to really make his mark on this staff while also continuing to keep most of the guys that are here. So if I were him, I would probably lean towards doing that. Hiring somebody that you feel really, really good about instead of hiring one of Jim Schwartz's guys to be your first coordinator as the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes these things don't work out. We saw that Kevin Stefanski he went through a lot of different coordinators at every one of those positions: offense, defense, special teams. And sometimes you have to make those decisions. So you want to be in a position of strength, in my opinion. So if I were him, I would go find the best guy that you can possibly find that is your person. And I would probably do that. Now, there are very qualified guys on the staff, as you have mentioned. You've got Tarver, you've got Ephraim Banda, you've got Jacques, and maybe some others. Those guys are all qualified to do the job. But if I'm the new head coach of the Cleveland Browns, I'm handpicking all of my coordinators now that Jim Schwartz has left the building.
Yeah, and I think that the loyalty word is important, and especially for a guy like Todd, who again has been in this league forever, has been coaching forever. We're seeing, to the point earlier about one of the reasons he was the front runner, he's bringing a bunch of Baltimore people with him. Like he's bringing people on the offensive side that he trusts to help him do this job. And I would imagine on the defensive side, he's thinking the same thing. Now he'll give the internal guys a fair shake, and if they're the best for the job, obviously you hire them. But also, look what Kevin Stefanski is doing in Atlanta right now. Like he had to face some shakeup here. He gets this second job, this second shot in Atlanta. How many more opportunities do you get? So what does he do? He gets the old band back together on offense, brings back Bill Callahan, brings back Alex Van Pelt, right? Like just hires a bunch of people he knows. And I think that's something to consider here, Ashley, is Todd is going to look at this as, how long has he known Ephraim Banda? Like, did he know him before he got here? Has he known him for a week? Like that's going to weigh into this decision a little bit, I think.
It is going to. And look, I mean, when you're a head coach and you're a first time head coach, in the case of Todd Monken, and you're at this stage of your career, like he's obviously going to be somebody who values having that sort of independence and authority as a head coach. And again, like we talked about this, I'm sure in a perfect world, the Browns wanted Jim Schwartz to stay here. But when you make the decision to do a coaching overhaul by firing your head coach, you're going to risk some of those other position coaches or coordinators that you really maybe still like leaving. And that's just the price of doing business in any coaching change. And I think it's almost like if you're going to make that decision and you really like Todd Monken, like you have to give him that authority. Otherwise, what's the point, so to speak? So that part of it is interesting. And somebody like Corey Undlin, like that's somebody who works in a similar system now. So again, that's like it wouldn't be a total overhaul and oh my gosh, we're gonna have to this guy's gonna want to switch a bunch of stuff with our defense. Like Todd Monken has already said, I like the way we play. He knows better than most because he's had to play this defense 2 times a year the last 3 years, how difficult it is to game plan for. And I actually think he was one of the best coaches at game planning for it, and especially game planning for this D line. So I also like that sort of insight that he brings. And I'm sure that's going to be at the forefront of his mind as they go through this process now.
And like, look, to the flip side of that, part of the job of a head coach is to try to identify younger coaches and try to identify younger talent and give them opportunities. And I do think that's something Kevin always tried to do when he was here. Obviously, that's something Jim has been really good at because you just go through the. I mean, we're sitting here naming off guys that could be next up for. Yeah, obviously, Jason Tarver's not a super young guy, but Ephraim Banda is pretty young. Jacques Césaire, pretty young. We never talk about a guy like Brandon Lynch who has been around and has coached a pretty good secondary for a long time. So, could he be a guy that gets a look? So I do think that's the flip side of this, Mary Kay, is as a head coach, I think it's important to have an ability to identify young talent. And if you believe that guy is ready or close to ready, give that guy an opportunity. And it would probably go a long ways with the defensive guys in that room to say, hey, this guy, he's been around. Like, you can trust him.
Yeah, absolutely 100%. And with where this defense is at right now, it's in such a good spot. They continue to have Myles Garrett, who is showing no signs of slowing down. And then you've got the rest of the guys on the defensive line that are so good. But at every level of the defense, you have really, really good players. So they're in transition a little bit, but for the most part, you still have some of your key guys from Super Bowl window 1. And now you've got some of your key guys from Super Bowl window 2. And those guys are Carson Schwesinger, of course, and Mason Graham, and now Tyson Campbell, and some of these guys. So you have a defense that is built for sustained success. And you just really kind of have to find the right leader for that defense. Jim Schwartz was a very good motivator. Players loved playing for him. And one of the things that he did better than anybody I've seen coach in the NFL in my entire career is he knew how to take a player and maximize his production to the point where players were having their absolute best seasons under Jim Schwartz. Look what happened to Myles Garrett under Jim Schwartz. He became what should be, and I have to say should, but what should be a first ballot Hall of Famer under Jim Schwartz with 2 NFL Defensive Player of the Year awards and the sack title. Jim knew exactly where his bread was buttered, and he knew that he needed to get his stars feeling good about themselves. And he was great at that. He knew that if you want, it's like happy wife, happy life, right? If you wanted to have a happy defense, you were going to make sure that your dogs were eating. And he did a tremendous job of that, right? I mean, Denzel Ward has flourished under him. Most guys have done a really, really nice job in their careers under Jim Schwartz. He knows how to bring out the best in his star players. And I think that's obviously one of the reasons that Myles loved him so much. Players love nothing more in a coach than a coach that can bring out the best in them and get them their 1,000 yards and get them their Pro Bowls and their All Pros and their hardware along the way to winning football games. That's what they love. So I think they're going to need to find somebody else that can do that. I mean, you have to take care of Myles Garrett on this defense. You have to. You have to take care of him during the practice week. You have to take care of him on the practice field. And you have to give him the exalted status that he's earned. And the next guy is going to have to learn very quickly that he has to do that, because sometimes there are different rules for a player like that. I mean, he's up there with the Lawrence Taylors of the NFL, the Bruce Smiths, Lawrence Taylors. I mean, you treat those guys a little bit differently, and you make sure that they are very, very happy. And that will have to be assignment number one for the new guy.
Yeah, again, it just kind of, I keep coming back to this. For as much as I said, like, I think I could see how explosive it could be if you kept Jim Schwartz around and you got out to a slow start or whatever. But just because of the way Jim coaches and that idea of he's going to take his guys and put them in a system they love and get them to play their best, doesn't that sound like Todd Monken on the offensive side? Isn't that what we say about Todd Monken? And it just makes you wonder, like, had this situation just been handled better all around, and then specifically at the end by Jim Schwartz, like, it makes even me wonder, Ashley, like, couldn't these two have made it work somehow? And I don't know, maybe it wouldn't have, but just that philosophy and what Mary Kay was saying about that is kind of like, man, it does feel a lot like you got two Todd Munkens or two Jim Schwartzes almost.
Yeah, no, it does. And I have wondered the last week and a half here if that is part of what has stung Jim Schwartz so bad. I think I said that on the day they hired Todd Monken, that we had speculated of, would it be hard for him if they had hired one of the young guys like a Grant Udinski or a Nate Shieldhouse? Would it be hard for him to lose out to the job to one of those guys? I think you can make the argument in a lot of ways it may have been harder to lose it to Todd Monken because they are so similar. And I think, like, to Mary Kay's point, Jim obviously felt like he had a real chance to get this job. And I think almost Todd Monken getting this job kind of shows him how potentially close he could have been, that they're very similar profiles, just on opposite sides of the ball. And unfortunately, as Jim Schwartz himself would say, that's life in the big city. And when you're a football team that needs to overhaul your offense and the guy you think can do it is not coming here to be a coordinator, because if you don't hire him to be your head coach, he's going to New York to be the OC for the Giants, that have a more ready-made roster, that have a young elite receiver in Malik Neighbors, that have Jackson Dart that they think could be their answer at quarterback. Like, it's a better situation. He was not going to come here to be an offensive coordinator. So I wonder if they're just too similar in that way. And it does make you wonder, like, man, if cooler heads could have just prevailed, I think that similarity could have been good. But I also think that similarity was kind of the downfall of Jim Schwartz here, too.
Okay, well, it's just like the Cleveland Browns to have this happen on the Friday after what should be a celebratory day for them. And obviously the Schwartz thing was hanging over it all to begin with, but this just sort of puts what happened last night on the back burner. For as bad as this season was, or as badly as it ended, and with guys getting fired and all of this, Mary Kay, Myles Garrett did win his second Defensive Player of the Year award, and he did it unanimously. The second player ever to win that award unanimously. And of course, Carson Schwesinger wins Defensive Rookie of the Year, 40 out of 50 first place votes. I mean, we kind of knew Myles was going to win this thing, but it is significant that it was unanimous. And I think significant that it was unanimous on a 5-win football team, for, that there wasn't anybody out there that was going to hold that against him. I just found that interesting. So here you go. Myles Garrett, you said it, potential first ballot Hall of Famer. I know we have to say that phrase carefully after everything that's happened over the last few weeks, but he's certainly on that track here. And this is just kind of another notch in his, or another case, I guess, another piece of evidence in his case for that.
Yes, absolutely 100%. And I think obviously the fact that he earned the NFL sack title this year, I think that led him to becoming that unanimous uh, NFL Defensive Player of the Year. So that had, I'm sure, everything to do with it. And he went on that blistering tear where he had 14 sacks in 4 games, I think it was, or 5 games. And it included a 5 sack game against the Patriots. It included a 4 sack game against the Ravens. And, those 2 games right there, that's 9 of his sacks this season in those 2 games. So that was pretty incredible. But that march that he was on, it's just undeniable. And I really don't see how you could have voted for anybody else besides him. The only argument would have been, the fact that they only did win 5 games. But I just don't think that you could have even gotten away with that. I mean, that person, if they didn't vote for him, would have been probably really called out and questioned for that, because he obviously is the NFL Defensive Player of the Year this year. There's no question about that. And I mean, he is showing no signs of slowing down, and he can win it again. He can go out there and win it again next year. And I think he's going to be on a tear to do that. He had 25 written on his wrist tape, and he wants 25. So I think he wants to break his own record, put a little breathing room between, that record, this record, and that next one, to make it harder for the next guy to come along and try to break that record. So I think he's going to be on another mission to do that and to get his third NFL Defensive Player of the Year award, which would tie him for most in the NFL. And he is knocking down those goals left and right that he set for himself when he was a rookie. They were lofty, lofty goals, like insanely crazy high goals. And it seemed so far-fetched that he was going to be able to achieve these dizzying heights. And he's doing it. And he's doing it. And he might even end up as the all-time sack leader in the NFL when all is said and done. He said that's what he wants to do. And I think he has a shot to actually go out and do it.
And I think just kind of thinking back to the end of the run there with this sack record and why he could potentially, and Jimmy Haslam, Mary Kay, you put a headline on this. Jimmy Haslam said he'd come back and do it, uh, break his own record, basically. I think what's interesting is sort of as it ended, we saw, they play the Steelers, and Aaron Rodgers is doing everything he can to get the ball out super quickly. And I thought the Bengals were doing a pretty good job getting the ball out quick up until, I mean, it took him almost that entire game to get that sack that he needed. He was doing towards the last part of the year. Malik Collins was out. Carson Schwesinger was playing hurt. Mason Graham was playing hurt. Alex Wright was missing games. And Alex Wright's the guy they've kind of chosen as their number 2 edge rusher here. So even with all of that, he was still out there chasing this record. He ends up getting it. And Ashley, every year we ask the question, is this going to be will Myles Garrett make a leap this year? And even at age 30, after breaking the sack record, it's not crazy to say, yeah, maybe in 2026, he's going to make another leap.
Yeah, and especially because, and this isn't, I think, necessarily something that has been talked about a ton. But you look at his season and he did slow down eventually because of those things that we are talking about in terms of the actual sack production itself. He only had 1.5 sacks over their last 3 games. And let's review those 1.5 sacks. It was the half a sack against Josh Allen that was originally credited to Mason Graham, and they had to look at it and said, actually, that was Myles. But that was more of a Josh Allen gave himself up sack. It wasn't Myles Garrett being authoritative. And then we know it took him all the way until the 5 minutes left in the game against the Bengals to get that sack. I think, and Mary Kay mentioned the 25 on the wrist tape. I think he thought after that win in Vegas that it was coming at any point in time, that it could have came the next game or within 2 weeks when they played San Fran and Tennessee. So for as great of a run as he had in the middle of the season, I think in theory, because of how much teams were game planning to not give up the record for him, he should have had more sacks. He should have had more sacks the way he was playing. So I definitely think it's possible when you take into account like the way he kind of trailed off a little bit. It wasn't as bad as other years, and I don't think it's entirely his fault. But I mean, I do think that's why that 25 plus range is realistic for him.
And the other thing, Mary Kay, is how healthy he's been able to stay. Like it's LeBron-esque, which is even more impressive in football. Like just obviously there's been dings, right? And there was, the shoulder after he had the car accident. There was, he had the ankle when he first came into the league and we had to wait for his debut for a few weeks. But he's been banged up and he's had little issues here and there, but not things that have kept him off the field for the most part, at least for long stretches of time. And I think that's the impressive thing too, is through all of this in a game when, how many times have we heard NFLPA people say this? It's a 100% injury rate. Myles has managed to stay on the field somehow. And I don't know if it's just there's just people out there that they're just freaks and they just bend certain ways. And it doesn't matter if their knee gets bent a certain way or their ankle gets bent a certain way. They just get right back up and keep going. And Myles seems to be blessed to be one of those people.
He really is. And it is remarkable because if you look at most of his colleagues at his position, so many of those guys have suffered torn ACLs and some of them have suffered ruptured Achilles. So many of them have gone through that. And for him to play at the level that he plays at and to be double teamed, triple teamed, chipped, and all of those things and have to take weird angles to get to where you're going. It is remarkable that he has not suffered an injury like that. And in this past offseason, he also had the plates removed that he had inserted in his feet when he was in middle school because he's got flat feet. But it really seems like those flat feet have served him well in terms of like his bend and getting around the corner. They've actually been an asset to him. But he has been able to stay healthy. And it really is, you would think like there would be, a bicep, a tricep, something somewhere along the line, but he's built differently. And some guys just are. I mean, he is tough. The connective tissues, the tendons, the muscles, the ligaments in him are just different. He's a different cat. I don't even know if he's real. I'm not even sure he's even real. But it is pretty remarkable. And of course, the big regret is that it hasn't been, it hasn't gone along with winning, right? I mean, he hasn't had the success in terms of playoffs to go along with all of his individual success. So hopefully that's coming down the road for him. But one point I wanted to make real quick, and this was one of the reasons why I thought, and maybe they thought, that there could be a path forward for Jim to come back is because look at what happened with Myles. Look at what happened with Myles. At this time last year, I was chasing him around Radio Row when he was out there begging to get the heck out of Cleveland. He said he would do whatever it takes to get out. He had no intentions of coming back whatsoever. It wasn't going to be about the money, so that wasn't supposedly going to cut it. And he wanted out in the worst way to go win a Super Bowl somewhere else. And the way that it all went down and the way that it happened, it felt like there would be too much bad blood, too much water under the bridge, that there would be no going home after that. And he went home. And not only did he go home, he went home and he had his most dominant, historic season ever, setting the sack record, winning his second NFL Defensive Player of the Year unanimously. I mean, he knocked it so far out of the park after an offseason in which most of us thought there's a darn good chance he's not coming back here. But he came back. He came back. He came home. So you can go home again. And I think they really, truly believed that Jim Schwartz would see the wisdom in coming back and coaching Myles again and coaching Carson Schwesinger again and Mason Graham and all of these guys. And unfortunately for them, it did not work out the way that it did with Myles after what he went through in his offseason.
Yeah, and well, look, kind of to your point earlier about what Jim maybe could have done had he come back, is the Myles template also involves that last part, which is okay, suck it up, come back, maybe get paid a little more money.
Mhm.
And then I don't want to say stick it to him, but like in a way, like stick it to him. I'm going to show up and do my job and do it better than I've ever done it. And then it's going to be on you guys to continue to build this thing around me because I've shown you I'm in. I've shown you that I'm that guy. And now it's on you guys to keep building this thing around me, or we're going to be right back here again. And like I said, we're recording. It's 2:30 now. We haven't heard from Myles yet. I don't think things are going to go off the rails, but as you always say, Mary Kay, stranger things have happened. At Ashley Carson Schwesinger too. I think we need to give him a little bit of time here as well. Just the thing about Carson, and I know there obviously the tackle numbers were huge, and he was the favorite to win that award all year. But just every time you watched the Browns defense, like Carson would do something in every game that was like, oh my God, I can't believe he did that. Running somebody down on a screen or running a running back down, whatever it is, getting off a block and chasing somebody down from behind. Like he was really impressive to watch this year and a surprise pick by the Browns when they took him, but goes down as one of Andrew Berry's best draft picks so far.
Yeah, the lead to the story yesterday that I wrote was like Carson Schwesinger entered the NFL with very little fanfare, but he's leaving his rookie year with some hardware because, I mean, it really is remarkable. I mean, Dan, I remember when they drafted him 33 overall, I looked at you and I said, who? Like, I was genuinely so shocked they took a linebacker. Obviously, Carson had only played or started and really played 1 year at UCLA, and he led the nation in tackles that year too. So, I mean, kudos to the Browns for recognizing the potential in him, especially with their scheme. And what's been so impressive with him, we've talked about this a lot with him and JOK, where like it took JOK about 2.5-ish years for the game, I think, to really slow down for him. And really, like, I think his second year wasn't quite as good as his rookie year. And I think that's going to be an interesting test for Carson. And then he was kind of getting it back at a level he had never had it in year 3. And when you're an off the ball linebacker like that, I think it just takes some time. And the things that Carson Schwesinger was doing and reading these offenses and the plays he was making, and this was something Jim Schwartz talked about, like, it's really impressive. That's something that a lot of veteran guys don't ever get. And he just sort of had that, I think, is a natural instinct, but he's also a very cerebral player. And I think you see it. And again, I mean, he got 40 of the 50 first place votes. So the fact that the 5 wins really wasn't held against either of these guys is a pretty impressive feat, I think, and speaks to their individual seasons.
Yeah, I mean, Mary Kay, just again, it was a pick that surprised a lot of us. But for him to come in and have this impact immediately, and by the way, wear the green dot. Let's not forget that. Like he ended up, we love green dot talk on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast, but that's what he had to do, and you could tell in training camp, like, okay, there might be something here. That doesn't always translate to the regular season, but it certainly did in this case.
Yeah, and I think that once again, I think there was some Jim Schwartz influence here in terms of taking a player like Carson Schwesinger, understanding what he can do really, really well, and giving him the tools to go out and play very, very fast and smart and loose and free and not have to think too much. In the beginning of JOK, he had to think too much about what he was doing, and he did not always understand his run fits. He didn't always seem to know exactly where he was supposed to be in space or how. With Carson, it's almost basically like see ball, get ball, right? I mean, he just has natural instincts, completely natural instincts, but I think that they have empowered him to be able to go do that, right? Don't worry about this. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about this assignment or that assignment. Just go out and play fast and loose and free. And I think that really helped him maximize his potential. So the next guy that comes in, and of course he still has Jason Tarver as his linebackers coach, that's what those guys are going to have to do with him again, is make sure that you let him play instinctually and that he's not worried that he missed his assignment over there or that he tried to do too much. No, It's okay, Carson. If you're way the heck over there and you see the play way the heck over there, go get it. Go run it down and make the play. And I think that is one of his strengths, that he has that nose for the ball and that he can make the play, and he has the closing speed and the other talents and the abilities to get there and make the play. And he doesn't have to worry about staying in his little paradigm that they have set forth for him. He can go do what Carson does best. And I think that's vitally, vitally important. And I think this is Andrew's signature pick. It's Andrew's signature pick. And I had been saying this so often leading up to the end of the season. People kept on saying, oh, Andrew should be fired. Andrew should be fired. I was like, are you crazy? I mean, you're going to have Myles and Carson Schwesinger walking up to the podium and accepting awards for NFL Defensive Player of the Year and NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year. And you're going to fire the guy that drafted them? You're really going to do that, especially the Carson pick? I mean, this draft is a pretty darn amazing draft. We don't know where it's going with the quarterbacks yet, but this draft was pretty darn good. I mean, Harold Fannin is going to be in the Pro Bowl in his own right very, very soon. I think that Todd Monken is going to be a coach that is going to bring out the best in Harold Fannin. I think Quinshawn, as long as he comes back healthy, I think he's going to be dynamite under Todd Monken in this offense. So, no, you were not even going to think about firing Andrew Berry in this season when he laid that very, very important foundation for Super Bowl window 2.
But of course, it certainly wasn't the Browns' fault entirely. Their defensive coordinator leaves the day after these guys get those awards. It's always something with this football team. Always something. Okay, we are going to wrap things up there. Super Bowl pick, anyone? I don't know. I haven't really been. I feel like this game has just been flying. Maybe I've just been too tunnel vision on like the Browns and like obviously paying attention to all this Cavs stuff that's been going on. I don't know. I don't have a good feel for it. The Seahawks are probably the better team. Sounds like Paul Anka maybe has some thoughts on it.
I
Ashley,
think Paul Anka probably has some thoughts based on the scratching at the door. I don't know if it's like because we got to see Drake May and the Patriots like in person, that I think the Seahawks obviously have such a good defense, but like there is something so special about Drake May and the way he moves and the way he can take hits and the way he finds these plays that I for some reason just have a feeling the Patriots are going to pull this off. But like you, Dan, I don't have a super good feeling for this game, but I just wonder if it will come down to the quarterback situation and if Sam Darnold's going to be able to get it done. But maybe he'll prove me wrong, and who knows? That would be a great story too, obviously.
I've been watching, watching these Seahawks and watching Sam Darnold, and I am so incredibly impressed with the football player that Sam Darnold has turned into. And I think he still has so much to prove. And also the game does slow down for a player who's been around a little bit longer. And Drake May is still pretty new and young. And I think that Mike McDonald will try to exploit that. And he's going to try to do some things that will try to rattle a younger quarterback. I think that Sam Darnold, although he's going to face an incredible challenge with a Mike Vrabel defense. Just kidding. That's an inside joke from NFL Honors.
Yeah.
But Mike Vrabel is going to give Sam Darnold the business. He's going to give him the business. But I'll tell you what, I've been really impressed with Sam Darnold's arm, with his decision-making, with his playmaking. And there's something special about these Seahawks this year. They almost seem like team destiny to me a little bit. But I think it's going to be a great matchup because you've got two amazing, amazing coaches. You've got two really good defenses. You've got two really, really good quarterbacks. I think it's going to be a great matchup. And of course, we on the Orange and Brown pod are huge Mike Vrabel fans, right? I mean, we're all big Mike Vrabel fans.
Yeah. I miss
He's
him.
from Akron, right? He's from Akron, and he was here. So we got to watch him coach up close and personal for a whole entire season, which was amazing to have that experience, to see how he does things, to see how he relates to players, to see how he relates to coaches, to see how he talks. I mean, he's just different. He's a different cat. He is dynamite. So I think there are so many cool things about this matchup. I don't have any idea who I think is going to win, but I don't know. There is part of me that thinks that the Seahawks, with their just amazing sort of dominant defense and with their a little bit more of an experienced quarterback, that maybe they might have the edge, but you can never put anything past Mike Vrabel. He's just too darn good at his job.
Yeah, that's who I keep coming back to too. And just the fact that he knows kind of how to navigate the week and how to navigate the day and the
Yep.
game and all. Like, it's just a weird game and a weird, like, you have the long halftime, all that stuff. I think things like that matter, especially with a guy like Vrabel, who always finds the little edges, always finds the little advantages. And maybe a part of me just wants him to bring the Super Bowl trophy back to one of the Stowe Applebee's so I can see it in person. But we'll see. All right, that'll do it for this edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Find us on Instagram, Orange and Brown Talk. Twitter's Orange Brown Talk. And, of course, our YouTube is Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. For Mary Kay and Ashley, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, everybody.